California Senator Kamala Harris announced this morning she is entering the 2020 presidential race. She released an official campaign video detailing her plans.
The California Democrat invited supporters to join her at a kickoff rally in her hometown of Oakland next Sunday. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is on Capitol Hill. We're so glad you're here to talk to us about this, Ed. Can you remind us about Kamala Harris's political background and her reputation in Washington?
Sure. She is a 54-year-old elected to the U.S. Senate back in 2016, former Attorney General of California, former District Attorney of San Francisco. And when she was running legal matters in that city, of course, became a big proponent of legalizing same-sex marriage and refused to defend California's ban on it, which eventually led to it becoming legal there. And when it happened, officiated the first same-sex marriage that happened after that ruling. Also known for a big settlement with Wells Fargo's and other lenders when she was Attorney General. Here in Washington has been a pretty active, aggressive questioner on the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees. Scored some headlines and viral moments back during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing for her questioning of him on the Russia investigation and abortion rights. And she becomes now the third woman from the U.S. Senate to announce a presidential bid. But we should note she's actually going full bore, no exploring. She's officially a presidential candidate as of this morning, which means she's the only one besides John Delaney, the former congressman of Maryland, and Julian Castro, the former HUD secretary. Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand, those other women from the Senate, are still in the exploratory phase. And we're expecting a formal announcement at some point from the Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as well, as we also await some kind of indication from several other Democrats and a lot of guys about whether or not they will run in 2020.
So, Ed, I look forward over the course of the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months to breaking down this ever-widening list of candidates, especially on the Democrat side, as it gets larger and larger. I'm curious, though, as more and more Democrats enter into this race, what are the political ramifications of so many folks from the same party, but in many instances with different points of view?
Well, really, their points of view are only different on the margins, Vlad. I mean, there's general agreement among all these Democrats that you got to fortify and maybe build out the Affordable Care Act, that you have to basically stand opposed to just about everything President Trump is doing. You don't support his cabinet nominees, his judicial nominees, what he wants to do about the shutdown. Where you may see differences, for example, are on issues of like whether or not U.S. troops should be coming home from Syria and how quickly. You know, are there differences perhaps on how much Americans should be taxed? We've seen that argument over the last few weeks sparked in some respects by the new members of the House Democratic Caucus. But I think one other potential element of this is, especially if this shutdown continues for several more weeks, is there any backlash towards these members of Congress who are now running for president, that perhaps they're focused too much on their own ambitions and not on solving this crisis here in Washington that continues to play out. You could see an argument made that perhaps if they focus more on trying to find a solution instead of going to Iowa and New Hampshire, maybe they'd find themselves in better shape. But regardless, many of them believe, look, this will get sorted out by top leaders. I have very little to do with it. Instead, I should launch my campaign and go out there and get started.
You know, we heard Kirsten Gillibrand launch her exploratory committee, and it certainly seemed like she was focusing on female voters. Julian Castro certainly seemed like he was focusing on Hispanic voters going to Puerto Rico. Of course, Elizabeth Warren perhaps focusing on more left-leaning voters. When it comes to Kamala Harris, where do you think her focus will be?
Well, it's no mistake that she's announcing it on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Anne-Marie. This is somebody who literally grew up in the civil rights and social justice movement out in California. She was born and raised in Oakland and Berkeley. She has talked generally about literally being pushed through the streets during marches by her parents in a stroller, and somebody who sort of uses that as a big part of her biography and her reason for being in public office. And I suspect we're going to continue to see that. Her campaign, we can say that now, her campaign pointed out that the color scheme, for example, and the sort of vibe of the look and the feel of her campaign in that announcement video this morning actually draws some inspiration from Shirley Chisholm, which of course was the first black woman to run for president back in the 1970s. And she's going to hold a big rally on Sunday in Oakland, California, again, her birthplace. which is designed to really kick off this campaign. But I think we'll see a lot of discussion about social justice, civil rights, economic empowerment for those that aren't necessarily feeling it right now, and a nod to her background. Remember, she's not only an African-American woman, she's also an Indian-American woman. She was the first Indian-American elected to the U.S. Senate. Her mother is from India, her father's from Jamaica, so she brings an interesting perspective and would conceivably be the first Asian American or Indian American elected president were that to happen. So a lot there to digest, and a lot that she will share as her campaign begins. But certainly I think that will be a trickier exercise for these Democrats, is if you've got 3, 4, 5 women, if you've got a few guys who've been at this for a while, what really is your reason for being, and how do you really differentiate yourself in a field of 15, 16, 17, maybe more Democrats who ultimately run? It's going to be tricky. I'm
going to start my flow chart now so I can just keep everything organized.
It's more like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, and how they all intersect on the issues.
Definitely. Ed, thank you so much.
Take care, guys.